profit centers, but still good to know. The traceable and the common fixed costs really come into play in Chapter 11, so I'll talk about that, and that's when you're discontinuing a segment. For Chapter 10, it's probably my most favorite chapter in the whole book because it's very straightforward with ROI. Return on investment is net operating income over average operating assets. And just the formula is pretty straightforward. And then, so they'll ask you for ROI, and then they'll ask you for margin and turnover. And just knowing how to calculate ROI, and you don't actually need the sales to calculate ROI, but when they give it to you, then they might be asking for margin or turnover. So ROI improves as sales increase, expenses decrease, and average operating assets decrease. And so just looking at the ratio, in order to make it bigger, your ROI bigger, you'd want, the top to be higher or greater. So your sales be greater or your expenses be less, which makes your net operating income higher, and then your average operating assets less, so that your denominator is smaller, or that you're being more efficient, you're using your assets more efficiently to create net operating income. And yeah, so that's the main things. I think that's the main things that I wanted to say with ROI. Yeah, and then I think there's about one question on residual income, so just know the formula. NOI minus average operating assets times the minimum required rate of return. Oh, and so what is average operating assets? What is included in that? It's all the assets that you're going to need to operate. So that can be cash, receivables, inventory, the property, plant, and equipment that you're using to make your products. All these things that you'd be using would be included in your average operating assets. And moving on to Chapter 12. So relevant versus irrelevant costs. The main one I want to focus on is that constrained resource. I believe in your quiz it talked about like a stamping machine or something to that nature, and how you would want, it was a bottleneck or a constrained resource. So you'd want to measure your net operating income based on that constrained resource. And so however many you could get through that constrained resource, that would be the most efficient way to make your product. And so constrained resources are always relevant. 11.2 talks about dropping a segment. And so this can be pretty confusing sometimes, but the way I like to look at it, or like a shortcut that I like to do, is just to compare the contribution margin to the fixed expense savings to determine the effect of dropping a product line or a segment. And so in the book, it gives you, it gives you an example. I'll try to make this bigger. So it gives you on page 518 this product line, housewares, that has this negative $8,000 already. So they're thinking, what should we do about this segment? Should we drop it or should we not drop it? So we can see their contribution margin is $20,000. So we're going to lose out on that contribution margin if we drop this segment. So that I see that as a kind of a negative. And then we look at what we can save by saving fixed expenses. Because we don't have this housewares anymore, we're going to be saving some of these fixed expenses, and that'll save us money because we don't have to pay for them because the segment no longer exists. And so moving on to the next page in the book, I just took a sort of screenshot of it. So it goes on to determine which ones are non-avoidable and avoidable. Sorry if this is really small. This is on page 519. And so the main thing that I want you to focus on for the exam is if housewares was discontinued, contribution margin lost, negative $20,000, less fixed expenses that can be avoided. So they said $15,000 was avoidable, $15,000 avoidable. So there would be a decrease in overall company net operating income, negative $5,000. And so on the next page, 520, it shows you how that $5,000 comes to play. And the main thing is just comparing the contribution margin to the fixed expenses that you're going to be saving. And so if you want to look at this Chapter 11 workout problems, it's on Canvas in Chapter 11 module. it's the same sort of thing. You're dropping this Troy division, and they want to know how much, if Troy division had been eliminated at the beginning of last year, Rice Corporation's operating income for last year would have been. And so we can just compare the contribution margin. We're going to lose out on that 100,000, or I see as a negative, but we're going to save money because we don't have these traceable fixed costs. So a positive 70,000. So if we just look at those two together, we'd have a segment margin of Troy division of 30,000 negative, or it would be 30,000 lower. And so 30,000 less without the segment. So hopefully that's not too complicated. Hopefully that's kind of understandable for you. That's the main thing I'm looking for on the exam. And so prepare a make or buy analysis. This is also important for the exam. So these examples can just help you determine what's relevant or what's not relevant in your calculation. And so, yeah, these can just help you try to wrap your brain around how you want to look at these questions to help you get them right on the exam, and what's going to be relevant or not relevant for making or buying a product. And so I want to look at, so again in this chapter 11 workout problems, these are all really, really awesome workout problems because they are from the test bank. So they might not be your exact problems that you'll see on the exam, but they are definitely similar to what you could see on the exam. And so I just want to go over this problem with you. It does over here tells you the answer on how the book reasons through it, and I'll show you how I kind of reason through it in order to get the answer that I get. And so they give you this information on a total basis, but I want to break it down into per unit basis. And so they're making 10,000 units, so I'm going to do it on a per unit basis. So direct labor, variable overhead, fixed overhead, and a total cost. So, and we're looking at making it or buying it. So on a per unit basis, let's see, this would be $5.50, and over here would be $4.50. Fixed overhead is $7, and that would be a total of, is my math correct here? Let's see, 550 plus 4. Maybe I'm missing part of the, oh, I think I'm actually missing the direct materials. So let me get that fixed for the next video.